This podcast contains adult content and discussions of first-time sexual experiences. Listener discretion is advised. Some stories may include themes that are sensitive or triggering for some audiences. We talk a lot about first times, but what about first orgasms? Welcome to Sexual Encounters, the very first time, the podcast where we talk about first times for better, worse, and everything in between. I'm Mary Jane, and today we're talking about first time fireworks. That mind-blowing, earth-shattering sexual encounter that leaves you yearning for more. That unforgettable experience that lives with you long after the relationship has ended. That I still want more experience that you go back to in your head so you can relive it again and again and again and again. Have you ever experienced it? Let's start with the listener story, who goes by the pseudonym Swati Bell, who shared their story that left them completely liberated by their first orgasm experience, free to explore and allow their body to be explored. And this is how it goes. I had been sexually active a few times before, and I would say it had been okay, but I had never had an orgasm. When I met Mr. V, we had an instant connection, but we tried so hard to fight the urge to jump at each other's bones. We would spend hours talking, getting to know each other, and exploring each other's minds, each other's sexuality. Then it happened. One day, while we were working in a shared space, a quiet room, each one focusing on their own work, he leaned into me and nestled his head on my shoulder. He loved the smell of my perfume and turned in for a whiff, and his breath down my neck sent shivers down my spine. I felt an instant response in my nether regions, a flood, an expectation. We started kissing passionately. Then he pulled away, like away, almost as if to give me space to think through what we were about to do. I sat there, looking at him for what felt like eons, and then launched back into his arms because my body yearned for more of what I had just tasted, and my mind knew this would be fantastic. He picked me up while we kissed passionately and gently placed me on the couch not far from us. Then he stopped again to seek my consent, and I nodded a yes. He proceeded to lift my dress up, gently but ravenously removed my underwear and feasted on my femininity, and I felt empowered. I had never been ravaged like that before, and before I knew what was happening, I heard music in my head, heat around my ears, and my eyes started watering. I was having my first real, not faked, orgasm. I tried to pull away from this new physical experience, but he held me firmly and continued to feast on me until my body settled, beads of sweat forming on my forehead. He was not done. He removed his clothes and sat on the couch, then gently helped me onto him. I was soaked, and feeling the strength of his hardness stretch my walls made my body sing and him grunt. It didn't take too many thrusts and kisses before he told me he was going to come. Hearing that made me start peeking, and as we climbed that mountain together, we peaked, and I could feel him swelling inside me. My walls tightened around him, and then suddenly, gosh, like a waterfall. My eyes widened as I questioned what had just happened. Had I peed on myself? He saw my eyes wide open and smiled, then grabbed my face for a passionate kiss. We rode the peak of the wave together, and finally, as our bodies relaxed and the ambient sound of the world returned to my ears, he whispered, "Ah, you squirted. That's a first for me." Orgasms can be liberating when experienced, but they are also elusive and many times faked, especially by women, from societal pressures to be seen as being in that club that has an awesome sex life. So joining us today to help unpack what an orgasm actually is and the struggle to recognize them, as well as help bust some myths, is Marla Renee Stewart. Marla is an award-winning sexologist, author, and sexual strategist who runs her own sexuality education company, Velvet Lips, and is also a co-author of the Sex Down South Conference. She studied human sexuality for over 22 years, has led more than 1,000 workshops worldwide, and has been featured in media outlets like Netflix, Trigger Warning with Killer Mike, and Love and Hip Hop Atlanta. She's also the co-author of The Ultimate Guide to Seduction and Foreplay, written with Dr. Jessica O'Reilly in 2020. Welcome to the show, Marla. It's a pleasure to have you join us for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So let's begin with the basics. What actually is an orgasm, biologically, psychologically? And why do so many people struggle to recognize or talk about their orgasms, especially during their first time?
Well, here's the thing. Not a lot of people are going to reach orgasm, maybe the first time maybe that they have sex. But when they reach an orgasm for the first time in general, that is sort of the illuminating factor because it's something that your body responds to, reacts to. And a lot of times we have orgasms because there is some sort of safety and security involved. So that's the psychological factor when it comes to orgasms. Of course, there's stimulation. And the stimulation can come in many different forms, right? So we know people, you could stimulate the genitals, stimulate the body, but in addition, you probably have to stimulate the mind. And we know from people like Barbara Carrellis who can have an orgasm just by thinking themselves into an orgasm, right? And orgasm is one of those things that is such an elusive, I don't want to say elusive, but it's one of those things that people, it's like you don't get it until you got it. So when you experience an orgasm, you're like, oh, this is what people are talking about. Oh, this is amazing. And I think that in and of itself, because some people maybe don't experience that, or, there's all sorts of reasons why people might have an orgasm challenge or blockage. And so when those challenges or blocks are defeated or moved through, that's when we really can experience all the pleasure that our body has to offer.
So, one of the reasons orgasms can be so confusing, especially for the first time, is because of some of the many myths that we absorb. Some of them come from pornography, pop culture, or outdated sex education. And honestly, they can really mess with our expectations. So, I'd love to run a few of these myths by you, Mala, and get your take on where they come from and why they stick around and how people can unlearn them. So let's start with one of the most persistent myths, that the only real orgasm is the one that happens during penetration. Why is this myth so common? And what would you say to someone who thinks they're broken because they haven't orgasmed this way?
Well, I think part of it is Freud's influence. So in psychology, Sigmund Freud had a ginormous influence over what he was saying and how he was saying it around women's bodies in particular. And so because he was a man, I imagine he's saying like, hey, if I penetrate you, then you should be having what he deemed quote unquote, a mature orgasm. And so having a mature orgasm meant that you are having an orgasm through penetration. But we know biologically, a lot of women, folks with vaginas, do not have orgasms through penetration. And it's mostly because of the nerve endings. There's a lack of nerve endings in the vagina simply because we have the ability to give childbirth. And so in our DNA, we have this ability. So all the nerve endings, if we were to, I mean, childbirth hurts already. I'm not sure if you had a child, I had a child, and that is an experience of itself. Now, I can't even imagine if all of those nerve endings were just, and so a lot of our nerve endings are concentrated in the clitoris, similar to the head of a penis, right? We have that same sort of biological structure. So it makes sense that we would have more orgasms through clitoral stimulation. But what Freud tended to say was, oh, hey, that is an immature orgasm. If you're just going to go for the clit, that's not a mature orgasm. It's not what I don't know, a real woman would have. And so I think this stigma has stuck with people. And I think because people want to feel connected through penetration, I think a lot of it is wanting to have that desire to have orgasm or to be the 20% of, people who do have orgasm through penetration. And so it's a challenge to think about. But overall, I mean, we're dealing with the stigma of that orgasm challenge, and which is why we have a lot of the orgasm gap between, women and men. It's because there's so much, like you said, misinformation, miseducation around orgasm. So, do we all aspire to be that top 20% that can, orgasm through penetration? Maybe, sure. But the 80% or however much percentage it is, there's a lot of us who just don't. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind because I have clients all the time and they're like, I want to orgasm through penetration. I'm like, that's a great goal. However, is not a real logical goal, but it's not saying it couldn't happen. But, the likelihood of it happening is going to take some work. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of trust. It's going to take a lot of safety, security, you knowing your body, being in your body, really embracing your own pleasure, your own care, your own, the own love for yourself, your own sexual energy, embracing your own sensuality. That kind of thing is going to help you curate that, orgasm for yourself. That's what I would say to that. But I think it's all Freud's fault. And we just keep perpetuating it over and over again, having these goals, especially, because people do see it in porn. People do see, there people having these penetrative orgasms in porn, and that's a goal. And they don't realize it's entertainment and that these are actors. So the real hope is to help people relinquish those, sexual scripts that these things need to happen because, the connection of somebody penetrating you.
I'm glad that you mentioned the nerves being on the outside because sometimes, in my experience anyway, I would feel like, oh my gosh, I just had an immature orgasm, and
Mm.
we're not even done yet. And then I feel so bad. And then that, oh my gosh, what do I do next? And this is where, the faking of the orgasm comes in.
Right.
Yeah, because you're trying to make sure that the other partner feels satisfied as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of people faking orgasms for many different reasons, but yeah, they just want to be connected to their partner and hoping to be connected to their partner without really tapping into their own sensuality or sexuality to really be connected to their partner.
Then there's this next myth that really feeds into the whole orgasm gap conversation. Men always orgasm, women rarely do. How does this idea that orgasm is inevitable for men and elusive or even optional for women shape people's early sexual experiences? And what's the truth behind the stats?
Well, the stats are, I mean, it's true. I have a client, right now who hasn't had an orgasm in 20 years, and she's with her husband. And so to say it's not true or that women do find orgasms elusive, they do. Some of them do because they don't know their own body. I literally had to show this woman where her clitoris was. She had no idea. She was like, I don't even know where it is. I'm confused. I don't have any feeling. And so my job is to help people like that and understand like, hey, You do have a clitoris. You can have an orgasm. We just got to figure out how to make it happen for you. And so I think that is one of the main issues that folks have. So with men, of course, a lot of them, I mean, there's a stigma about that too, because some men, sometimes it might take longer for them to have an orgasm. And so they're also dealing with like, oh, I'm supposed to have an orgasm every time, right? They're like, oh, I get to have an orgasm every time. And because of that outside stimulation, it might be easier. But not to say that a woman's orgasm can't be easier. It's just that she has to know her body. And we are just not taught to look at our bodies. We are not taught to see what our bodies look like. We're not taught like how to stimulate our bodies. And a lot of those things, when people learn those things, usually are coming from maybe intuition, but maybe porn. You know what I mean? So that's where porn becomes education. So that's why we have to move into like porn literacy and all of that stuff so people can understand what they're actually viewing. So yeah, I think it's unfortunate that, women still have these notions of elusive orgasms. And I think it's sad because I think if we all had the feeling of being empowered by our own bodies and like, again, tapping into our sexuality, we wouldn't feel like this. We'd be like, oh, I feel good. I want to know. This is how I like to be touched. This is how I want to move. This is how I want you to touch me. This is what I like. I like you to touch me here, here, and here. Don't touch me here, here, or there. Like I really think that lack of communication is what contributes to the orgasm gap and why, men are able to have more orgasms than women. My favorite book is called She Comes First, or one of my favorite books is called She Comes First by Dr. Ian Kerner. And it's a brilliant book. And it's just stating, like, hey, have the woman have her orgasm first, period. Let's close that orgasm gap so we're not dealing with the same BS over and over again. But you can get out of that myth or you can get out of that sexual script if you are tapped into your body's sensual and sexual energy.
Well, I don't know if it's true or not, but I've heard even for men that depending on whether they are circumcised or not, if they're circumcised, they may take longer, which also affects the response from a woman's point of view if it's somebody who has a sexual partner that's female because of the longevity of it.
I mean, there's so many things around like the circumcision piece. I mean, we could go in deeper in there, but we do know from research that people who are not circumcised have a longer time before erectile dysfunction may come on, if it comes on at all. So that's also something to think about. That is actual research.
There's this idea that if you can't orgasm with a partner, but you can on your own, then there's something wrong with your body or your relationship, or there's something wrong with you. So, how can folks reframe this notion, especially if they're feeling discouraged or insecure?
Well, I think one of the best things that we can do is remember that we are our best lovers. We know how to touch ourselves. And I think we really have to realize that it's okay that we can touch ourselves and we can be our best lovers and we know how to turn ourselves on. I think that's an asset. And so to reframe that, we could just say, like, hey, I know how to turn myself on. I've definitely had partners where I'd be like, this is what turns me on. And then they didn't do the thing that I asked them to do. Right. So when you have someone like that, that means that's deteriorating your trust and security and your safety to actually have meaningful, wonderful, loving, pleasurable sex. Right. So yeah, I think, all the people who, fake things with their partners and whatnot, I guess reframing it really just looks like, hey, I am my best lover. I know how to touch myself. I'm asking you to touch me. I like being confident in your communication. That's the only way that you're going to be able to help with understanding how your lover is going to understand your own body.
Yeah, indeed. And then I came across a tweet the other day that really stuck with me. Someone, a female, tweeted, sex is genuinely not enjoyable, hey? And then the reply from one of the other Twitter users was, you put 150 watts inside your vagina and then get mad because a human can't make you come. And a lot of people chimed in, agreeing, basically saying that sex toys ruin the orgasm experience because they create a kind of unattainable pleasure that a partner could never live up to. So here's my question. Is that true? Do sex toys ruin real sex, or is it just another myth that keeps people from embracing tools that can actually enhance intimacy?
Yeah, it's just another myth. Absolutely, because sex toys can't, you're using sex toys. These are tools. These are things you can use for your sexuality. So, yes, you can use them, but there's a vast difference between someone touching your body, right? Touching your skin, which is the largest organism on your body, your largest pleasure center. That is the thing that is going to connect you, and that is the thing that's going to be able to turn you on. So these are totally different elements. Just because you use a toy, and it doesn't mean you can't use a toy with your partner. You act like those are like mutually exclusive, right? Like those things are not mutually exclusive. You could also use a toy with yourself. You could use a toy with a partner. But if you're not using a toy with a partner, I think it's perfectly fine, because there are other elements that should be turning you on. And if you're understanding your own desire, what you love, how you want to be touched, how you want your partner to touch you, you're having that great communication, you're developing that safety and security, you're telling them, hey, this is what I need from you in order for me to make me feel good, then hopefully you can help them learn your body more and better so that they can help you to have an orgasm. So I think when people feel threatened by toys, I think it's their own insecurities. Maybe they're lacking a certain sexual prowess and they are feeling some type of way about it.
So, in our listener's story, the storyteller comes to a powerful realization that she is completely liberated by sexual encounters and that she's free to explore her body and that she learned how to squirt for the first time, which is something that she thought was far-fetched and fake and that she had only seen in pornography. So, this makes me wonder how much of what we believe our bodies can do or can't do is shaped by shame, silence, or the scripts that we pick up from pornography.
I'm definitely not anti-porn, but I think, when you watch porn, it's a way to find creative solutions, right? If you've been in a box your whole life, maybe you have some religious stigma, maybe there's some shame that your family gave you around whatever it is, maybe your sexuality or whatever. There's so many boxes that we get put into. And so I think porn allows us to step outside of that box, see the creativity in the world, and maybe try to invoke some of that creativity, in our own lives. But the shame, the stigma, those things can really do damage because you really aren't able to really express yourself. So, going to sex therapy, going to a sex coach, helping you get rid of that shame, stigma, all of those things are going to help you to be able to really fully embrace yourself.
So, what advice would you give to someone who's never had an orgasm and is starting to feel anxious about it?
First of all, maybe kind of do your own, research or homework. And I think part of that is seeing if it's biological. So, is it biological? Is it something, going on with your system? Are you taking meds? Are there meds that are interacting that are shutting down your system or, preventing you from having an orgasm? If you've never had an orgasm, don't get discouraged. You'll get there. But we got to figure out, are you looking at your body? Do you know where your clitoris is? Do you know where your G spot is? Are you looking at different toys or different tools that can help you? Do you need a pelvic therapist? Go through the different types of channels to help you understand, like, hey, what is preventing me from maybe having an orgasm? Sometimes it's just around safety and security and just letting your wall down, letting your guard down, because when we have our guard up, we are unable to really have the orgasm that we desire. And again, that's about feeling safe, secure, comfortable in your own body, communicating how you feel, communicating what you like, and really just going for it. Don't get discouraged. There's something out there that's going to help you realize why maybe what's preventing you from having an orgasm. Or maybe it's just about you trying new things, right? Maybe it's about you trying the new toys or trying whatever. So don't give up, because I've definitely worked with people who went from never having an orgasm to having squirting orgasms. So I think there is the ability, again, being comfortable in your own body and really, just really kind of relaxing with yourself and creating that safety within you so that you can have an orgasm, with yourself.
I know that you offer classes and tools and resources for people who want to learn how to explore orgasms and enhance their pleasure journey. So, would you like to share a bit more about some of these resources that you offer?
Absolutely, absolutely. So definitely if you go on my website, velvetlipssexed.com, and you go to velvetlipssexed.com/shop, I have a free class that talks about the free arts and science of seduction. So it really helps to dive into one of the beginnings or the foundational work of, I believe, of making sure you have connection with someone. Once you have that connection, that emotional, sexual connection and chemistry, those are the things that you're going to need in order to foster orgasm. Again, that safety, security, but also just that genuine connection and building up that intimacy and affection are going to be number one. So, yes, go to my shop, check it out. I'll have more classes up soon. You can check out my app. It's just called Velvet Lips, and you can also come to the Sex Down South conference, of course. We always have, 80 plus workshops around sex and sexuality and orgasm. And we are, we're moving into our 11th year this year. So, those are the types of resources I think you need. But again, working with the specialist, seeing what all the things that you need to eliminate what the problem might be is your best bet into figuring out how to have that amazing, euphoric, maybe past elusive orgasm.
Well, thank you so much, Marla, for this enlightening conversation. I love how you reminded us that pleasure is not something to feel guilty about, and that once you relax and you know your body and you embrace the curiosity and you embrace it with confidence, you'll find that euphoria. So I hope our listeners can walk away feeling more open to exploring their bodies and their desires without guilt, without shame, and entirely on their own terms.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate you bringing me on.
First, orgasms can be awkward, exhilarating, confusing, or downright unexpected, sometimes all at once. What's clear is that we don't talk about them enough. That moment of discovery, of realizing your body can surprise you in the best ways, is powerful. But getting there often means unlearning a lot of unrealistic media portrayals, myths about penetration, and shame that tells us pleasure has to look a certain way or arrive on cue. As Marla mentioned in our conversation, it comes with relaxation, feeling comfortable, feeling secure, feeling confident in your body and in your partner and in the experience. So whether your first orgasm was joyful, underwhelming, late to the party, or still on its way, it's never too late to get curious about pleasure. You'll get there. Next time on Sexual Encounters, we flip the lens. In our bonus episode, we discuss what happens when you're not the virgin, but the person on the other side of someone else's first experience. From miscommunication to mismatched expectations, we'll talk about how it feels like to be on the other side, to be the one guiding the experience of someone's first time. If you'd like to share a story of first sexual encounters where you were the experienced one, guiding that first experience of the other party, would love to hear it. Submit anonymously on bit.ly, Let's Talk Firsts, or DM us at Let's Talk First, or you can email sexualencounterstheveryfirst@gmail.com. You're listening to Sexual Encounters, the very first time.